Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jude Poirier, and I'm an ambassador for the Dartmouth Political Union. On behalf of the DPU, I'd like to welcome you to Abortion After the Fall of Roe, a debate on abortion policies in America. Founded in 2018, the Dartmouth Political Union is Dartmouth's preeminent nonpartisan, student-led political organization dedicated to fostering open discourse and challenging preconceptions. To this end, we host speakers from across the political spectrum, organize both student and expert debates, and hold campus-wide discussions on the issues that matter most. Our event tonight is the fourth and final in a series of expert debates, the DPU Debate Series, Critical Discourse in the Age of Disagreement, which took place throughout this academic year. From DEI to the merits of capitalism, this series tackled some of the most pressing and controversial topics facing our nation, fostering respectful conversations about the issues that truly matter. We're excited to end the series with one of the nation's most contentious modern issues, abortion. This series was brought to campus with the support of the Office of the President and Dartmouth Dialogues. Tonight's event would not have been possible without the support of our donors and the Office of Student Life, particularly President Bylock, Senior Advisor Drynan, and Assistant Dean McKenna. Thank you. Before introducing our moderator and debaters, I'd like to share the results of a poll conducted with the in-person audience following the Monk debate format. 70% of you believe that abortion should be legally accessible in most cases, while 30% of you say it should not. And none of you are unsure. Furthermore, 30% of you are open to reconsidering your position. We will poll the audience again at the end of the debate to see if anyone's mind has changed. Now for the reason you are all here. We have one student moderator tonight, Grace Wilkins, a member of Dartmouth's class of 2026 studying economics and Italian, and she serves as the DPU's Vice President of Operations. Mikki Kendall is an author, activist, and the creator of the Solidarity is for White Women hashtag. A prominent voice in intersectional feminism, Mikki is the author of Hood Feminism, Notes from the Women That a Movement Forgot, which critiques the ways in which mainstream feminism has often overlooked the issues affecting women of color. Her work focuses on social justice, race, and gender, and she frequently speaks on issues of inequality and the challenges facing marginalized communities. Christina Bennett is a pro-life advocate and news correspondent for Live Action, a leading organization in the fight to end abortion in America. She is a frequent speaker at pro-life events, and her work has been featured in national media outlets where she shares the message of the value of every human life. Christina has appeared in various interviews as a voice for the pro-life cause. Please join me in giving Grace, Mikki Kendall, and Christina Bennett a warm welcome.
Thank you so much to Jude for that great introduction. I'm excited to get started. So tonight, just to give you guys a sense of the structure for this evening, we'll start out with about 45 minutes of moderated Q&A, and then we'll move on to audience Q&A. And when we get to that point, I'll ask you guys to stand up if you're interested in asking a question and coming into the aisles where we'll have mic runners waiting for you. So thank you so much to you guys for making the drive up to Dartmouth on probably the coldest day of late May in New Hampshire. But yeah, excited to get started.
Me too.
So both of you guys have spoken passionately about your beliefs regarding abortion, drawing on your personal experiences and community advocacy. So to start off, can you each share the journey that led you to your current stance on abortion and how it shapes your vision for abortion policy in the post-Roe v. Wade landscape? So can we start off with you, Christina?
Yes. When I was in college, I didn't have a strong opinion on abortion. My freshman year, if someone asked me, are you pro-life or pro-choice, I don't actually know what I would have answered, because growing up in Connecticut, abortion was something that was normal. We don't require parental notifications for minors to get abortions. I remember people in high school getting abortions, and my only thought process was, I wonder if they're going to get in trouble with their parents, because you didn't have to tell your parents in high school. My family didn't talk about abortion. I never heard abortion talked about at church. And so I went to college, Southern Connecticut State University in New Haven. I was pursuing a communications degree, and I thought I'd probably go into some sort of helping field. And one day I visited a church, and someone said to me, God wants you to know something remarkable happened around the time of your birth. And so I thought, well, who was there around the time of my birth? My mother. So I asked her, did anything remarkable happen around the time of my birth? And she said, I met an angel before you were born, but I don't want to talk to you about it, which was very strange for my mom. She's never said anything like that before. So I actually left it alone because she really was serious when she said, I don't want to talk to you. But I came back 3 months later, and I kind of pressed her and said, Mom, will you please tell me? And the angel was an African-American woman, an elderly woman at Mount Sinai Hospital in Hartford, Connecticut, who talked to her before she was about to abort me. My father was coercing her and pressuring her to get an abortion, and this African-American janitor saw her in the hallway, looked at her and said, do you want to have your baby? My mom said yes, and she said, God will give you the strength. It didn't end there. She had to walk into the waiting room and then go into the doctor's office, and he yelled at her and told her, don't leave this room. But she ran out, never told me until that day, and here I am today.
I've always been pro-choice. I believe that the quality of a life matters most. Without a whole bunch of discussion about my family history, I will share that I was primarily raised in kinship care. I know what it is to feel like an unwanted child, and I don't believe any child should experience being unwanted. Additionally, I have had an abortion. It was medically necessary and all of that jazz, but also my living children mattered more than a pregnancy that was non-viable from the start. I opted not to die with that pregnancy, because that's where I was headed, right? And you could debate it, you can argue that I know what I'm talking about, but I was hemorrhaging on a table in the middle of the night, and somebody, a very kind black nurse, called a doctor who performed abortions because the doctor on duty did not. And that doctor came, and she saved my life. I was on my 4th bag of blood, and it was not stopping, right? I have always thought, even before that experience, that if you are going to make a decision about someone else's body, you better be willing to deal with the consequences of that decision for them. I don't think we have a right to force anyone to give birth. I think we have a right to decide whether or not we personally will have an abortion. But decriminalizing abortion does not get rid of abortion. The only thing older than abortion is prostitution, right? And it's only probably older by about a month. We will never get rid of abortion. What we will get rid of is safe, legal abortion. I have a history degree, so unfortunately, I know what it looked like before Jane, and I know that a lot of people died seeking abortion as medical care, because ultimately, it is medical care, and it should be between the pregnant person and their doctor and no one else.
Christina, would you like to respond?
Yes, I would. I mean, first, I'd like to say that I'm sorry for what you suffered. I suffered a miscarriage myself, and I know how painful that can be. And I did read your story in Salon, and I can't fully understand what you went through because I'm not a medical professional. I do believe that what you went through was an inevitable miscarriage. And again, I don't know all of the details. But what I will say is that as pro-lifers, we do not believe that abortions are ever medically necessary. We do believe that there are times when a child has to be separated from their mother, induced because of a difficult pregnancy or an emergency. We do believe that those are not the same as an abortion, which is the direct and intentional killing of a child in the womb. So I just want to make that clear that there are specific situations, an ectopic pregnancy, for example, I know that's not what you went through, and other situations where someone needs miscarriage management, the child is dying, it's a non-viable pregnancy. To be pro-life, you're not against that. You're not against miscarriage management, but you do believe in inducing pregnancies because that's different than dismembering a baby in the womb. Lastly, I'll say, I don't believe that children should exist just because they're wanted or not wanted. I'm the mother of a child through foster care, foster to adopt program, my husband and I don't know a lot about his bio parents because of the unique situation, so I don't know if he was wanted or not, but that doesn't change who he is and his human dignity. So I don't believe that children should live or die because they're wanted or not wanted.
And I believe that while foster care is great, if it works, we have something like 450,000 children in foster care every year in America. Some of them will die in foster care at the hands of either the biological parents or the foster parents. I think that saying everyone has a right to life without thinking about their quality of life inevitably does a great deal of harm, not just to that individual life, but to our society as a whole, right? Every time we start to get into discussions about whether or not life is a miracle, blah, 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 all I can think is the very scientific fact that out of the gate, some 50% of pregnancies will automatically terminate. I don't call it miscarriage management. I call it abortion for the very specific reason that for a very long time, it is cells. It is not yet formed into a fetus. I am a person who believes that life starts with breath, and if you cannot breathe and you are wholly dependent on something else in order to function, you are probably not capable of life.
I want to thank both of you guys for sharing your stories. And I want to move on to kind of the theme of maternal mortality rates in general and those disparities among health outcomes for women. So we all know that the US has one of the highest maternal mortality rates among most developed nations, with significant disparities affecting Black women, who are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications than white women. So what role, if any, does abortion policy play in mitigating or exacerbating these inequalities? And what specific measures would you advocate for to improve health outcomes for all women? And this time we can start.
Okay, so a couple things. We do not have easy access to health care. Yes, I know we have insurance and all of that, but the quality of your health care varies wildly based on your race, based on your income, based on your location, right? I'm from Illinois. My state is one of 2 states currently providing much of Indiana with healthcare resources, not just for abortion, but in general. So if we are not going to provide healthcare to people who are pregnant out of the gate as a uniform platform, we've already set them up for a greater level of risk. One of the most significant ways that pregnant people die is intimate partner violence. If we're not going to address that, again, we are setting them up for outcomes that will be less than positive. Then there is food, there is housing, there are all of these things. And if we are going to say everyone should be able to carry a pregnancy to term and all life matters, we've got to care about the life that exists after that pregnancy is over. We've got to care about the person that that pregnancy is in. If we are not going to do those things, I often feel that this is a conversation that's really not capable of going anywhere, because if you are 3 times more likely to die as a result of pregnancy, and Adriana Smith is an example that is happening in Georgia right now. Adriana Smith is dead. Adriana Smith is being treated as a science experiment because a corpse is being kept semi-functional on machines so that a pregnancy that is destined to fail, we know this from prior experience, can continue under a heartbeat bill. And yes, Georgia is now saying that's not what its intent was, but it was very unclear. We are not taking care of pregnant people. And until we're willing to take care of them all the way through the process and effectively manage health care, we're not getting anything done except making more tragedies.
Well, I think maternal mortality is not something that we should be divided on in regards to whether you're pro-life or pro-choice. We are in a crisis with maternal mortality, especially in regards to Black women, and we should all be in agreement about that. But there are ways to fight maternal mortality that do not include killing the child in order to try to save the mother. So one of the most important things that we need is prenatal care. It's very important for women as they're going through their pregnancy to be seen by doctors, to be seen by medical professionals. We need to make sure that doctors are aware of their biases and their prejudices. One of the biggest issues with maternal mortality is that Black women don't feel like they are listened to by their medical providers. And so medical providers need to be trained on how to listen to women and how to understand really where they're coming from. We also need care after a woman has already had her baby, because there are, I think, 1/3 of maternal mortality deaths are related to after the woman has already had the baby. And so we need to make sure that women are being seen after they've already had the baby. Pregnancy resource centers, I worked for one for 4 years as a client service manager. They exist to help pregnant women in many different ways, material resources and support, but also helping them to connect with good doctors, good medical professionals, listening to them, letting them know they're not alone, giving them that support. And all of those things are ways that we can reduce maternal mortality. I don't believe that we have to kill the child in order to try to save the mother. because 80% of maternal mortality cases are preventable. So we're talking about something that is preventable. Again, prenatal care, again, implicit bias training, all of these different things, giving women support, midwives, doulas. Doulas are so important, making sure that women have access to that kind of support. All of those things can help us to reduce maternal mortality while still protecting preborn children in the womb.
Yes. So a couple things, just as a flat statement of my own personal policy. We keep saying women. Trans people exist. Trans women are women who cannot get pregnant, but trans men can, right? And often, and so can non-binary people, often part of that mortality rate is the prejudice against someone's gender identity, the prejudice against someone's race. And yes, implicit bias training is great, but implicit bias training is not going to solve the problem tomorrow. If we're not going to fix the bias first, we're going to still have the same outcomes while we limit access to a therapeutic medical procedure that this person who has full agency and capability of thought has chosen. We do not decide for anyone else, except for people who have a uterus, that they are not allowed to make decisions about their own bodies and medical care. We shift the focus to the fetus inside that body and say that you should make a different choice because I am uncomfortable with your choices. That's not equitable, fair, or right, or rational. That is just another form of bias being used to replace someone's own judgment.
I mean, I think all pregnant people deserve quality health care and deserve support. And I think no matter what their circumstances are, no matter how they identify, I want them to be able to get that support. But I don't believe in pitting the mother against the child. The child is a human being. When I was inside of my mother's womb, I was a person. I was a human being, just in a much smaller sense because an earlier stage of life, but equally valuable, even though I was in the womb and I was smaller. And so the pro-life position is that we're not pitting the mother against the child. We want support for the mother, and we want equal rights for the child. And it's not easy, these situations that we're talking about, and I would agree with you. Nothing's going to change overnight, but I do think that this is one area that we can come together and try the best that we can to support women who are in these circumstances.
Mikki, I wanted to talk more about something that you had mentioned in one of your responses on domestic violence and reproductive coercion. So beyond maternal health, there are critical concerns related to reproductive justice, including issues like coercion, non-consensual condom removal, and the impact of domestic violence on reproductive choice and safety of mothers. So how do you each propose addressing these complex challenges while maintaining your respective positions on abortion? And this time we can switch. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned a lot of things, and those are things that I'm connected with. My mother is a survivor of intimate partner violence. My aunts are survivors of domestic violence. So I actually grew up just hearing all of their stories, and I'm still hearing their stories today. And in my mom's case, it was actually her children that caused her to leave a toxic situation. And that is the case for many women. One of the most vulnerable times that a woman, has in a domestic violence, intimate partner violence situation is actually after she leaves. And so the idea that she has to have the abortion in order to be free and then to separate herself from the partner, in reality, she could have an abortion and leave and still be just equally as much in danger because that's one of the times that she's the most vulnerable. So personally, what I've done over the years in working with women is just helping them to find support, whether that's leaving their home and going into a women's home or a women's shelter. I've helped multiple women do that. I've called hotlines with them. I've helped them find safe places. I've helped them to separate from relationships. I've helped them in various different ways to walk through these really challenging circumstances. And I think that's what it takes. Step by step, working with women, letting them know they're important, getting them out of domestic violence, intimate partner violence situations, getting them therapy, getting them counseling, finding them housing, I mean, in Connecticut, we do not have enough resources, and it is really scary and tragic because so many women do suffer in this way. But again, the answer is never to kill the child. Many times women will leave because of the child that they want to protect. And so I think that we must work on protecting the woman and also protecting the child, even in these difficult, tragic circumstances.
So I was a victim of intimate partner violence. I'm going to tell you a story. It's brief, don't worry, I'll be within my time frame. When I left, one of the first things I discovered is that if you have had a child with your abuser, it is nearly impossible to get away from them because they have custodial rights. They have a right to see the child, and by proxy, because you have to pay for third-party visitation in many cases, they have a right to take you back to court over and over again. In my divorce, my ex took me back to court 43 times in 2 years. He wrote me notes on my child's back, and I still had to argue with a judge about whether or not he was a danger. I think it's very easy from the outside to say you can just leave and that will be the end of it. In actual execution, and in many states, not just for domestic violence, but also for sexual assault, your assailant has rights, and those rights do not terminate based on their abuse. So when we are talking about this situation, it's great to be able to help someone leave. But years ago, while I was leaving my ex, I accompanied a young woman to have an abortion. And the reason she was having an abortion was because her then partner, after assaulting her to get her pregnant, had put his cigarettes out on her, and she was concerned that if he had access to this child, which legally he would have had access to, all he would do is kill the baby to punish her. All he would do is torture the baby because he tortured her. And the wild thing, because somehow he found out where she was going, I strongly suspect, because it was a small town at the time, that one or more of his friends was following her around. He sat outside, boo-hooing, bawling, crying, "Don't kill my baby, don't do this, don't do that." The only way she could leave and legally be able to completely sever all ties was to not share a genetic connection with him, right? And yes, there are women who go into the shelter system with their children, and then they're on the run. And what we see happen to them is they get arrested, eventually, for custodial interference or kidnapping. We also see the children killed to make a point to mom, or mom killed at visitation. We should make some decisions, sure, but we should also be aware that the world we live in is not perfect. And sometimes people are making the best choice knowing their situation that we do not know.
Can I just say that, first of all, I'm sorry for what you suffered. And in no way am I saying that leave and it's easy. I didn't say that, and I would never say that to someone who's in a situation because I know it's not easy. I still hear stories from my mom today, and she's just celebrated her 74th birthday yesterday. But what I am saying is that if you have, let's say, a 6-month-old with someone, and they become abusive, or maybe they've become abusive, everything that you would do from that point, you've already had a child, everything you do, whether that's separate, find a counselor, call the police, go into a different program, everything that you would do with a child that's already existing, I'm saying that those things are valuable and important, whether the child is in the womb or outside of the womb. What I'm saying is that the child does not need to die in order for a woman to receive the help that she needs in an intimate partner situation. Now, there's a million different stories. The ones that you shared are really horrible. I have other stories of women who things look different, but we're not going to just compare stories. But what I will say is that I believe that there's always hope, and I believe that there's always ways to find support without having to end the life of a child through the means of abortion.
And I believe that while that is a lovely possibility, there are too many states moving to curtail the ability to separate from danger currently, especially under this political administration, to make that determination because you live in Connecticut. Try Arkansas. It's a very different world when you hit Indiana or Arkansas or the Deep South. It gets real ugly once you get outside of blue states.
So moving on to narrowing in on more specific policies, I want to talk about exceptions. and exceptions for abortion policies. So most Americans across the political spectrum do support exceptions to abortion bans in cases of rape, incest, or when the life of the mother is at stake. So where, if anywhere, should the line be drawn to ensure the health and safety of mothers during pregnancy and delivery?
So I believe in safe legal abortion up until the point that, let's go with second trimester, end of second trimester, up until the point where even a premature delivery, a living person would result. Prior to that, because I do not know everyone's situation, and I actually don't really even love setting a limit, because I honestly believe abortion on demand is a better plan. I understand that will make some people upset. But I believe that because there are a lot of health issues that may arise where, yes, a child can be delivered, that child will not survive long past birth. Someone making a decision to have a third trimester abortion is facing a fatal fetal abnormality. There is not really a viable situation. And the actual act of giving birth is medically dangerous for people who can give birth. Let's just be clear, right? Preeclampsia, all of these things can occur. It is not always medically dangerous, but I do not know everyone's situation. And so I have always felt that when we start talking about exceptions, once again, we're curtailing someone else's health care. I really, really genuinely believe this should be a decision between the pregnant person and their medical team, because they are the only people who know the entire scope of this person's health, what is going on with the fetus, and what is going on more broadly in their life. If we have abortion without apology, without exception, we also can work to make abortion an unnecessary procedure for most people by doing things like making access to not just prenatal care, but birth control, right? Sex ed, all of these things. There are ways we can reduce the number of abortions that do not include telling someone they should legally have to meet these 3 criteria or this short list in order to seek the medical care that they are choosing to seek.
I don't believe it's ever necessary to kill a child in the womb. I believe that a child is a person, and I don't believe that it's ever medically necessary to suction them out, to dismember them, or to destroy their life through an act of abortion. I will say that there are pro-life OBGYNs and doctors that are here to help women in difficult situations. There's an organization called APLOG, and there are hundreds of pro-life OBGYNs and doctors across the country that are working to help women in complex situations so that they have support. Live Action, the organization I work for, if you go to our YouTube, if you go online, you can see videos where we actually talk to current doctors and also former abortionists who've left the field of doing abortions and now are helping women and helping their children. I will say, though, that in every state, no matter how pro-life the state is, there is an exception for the life of the mother. So even in Florida, which is a very pro-life state, there is an exception for situations where a woman is dying and that law allows for her to have that exception. I believe that every life has value, and regardless of the circumstances, I believe in protecting that preborn life in the womb. And I also want to mention, just like earlier, we talked about the situation of the woman in Georgia, Adriana Smith. And I just want to make the point that her grandmother is saying that she wanted the choice, or her mother, the child's grandmother, but she's not said that she wants to terminate the baby that she actually just named Baby Chance, or even to pull the plug. So I know that she is in distress, and she said to the media that she's wanted the choice, but I support what Georgia is doing in protecting that child growing inside of her, and hopefully Chance will get to viability, and hopefully Chance will be born and have a chance at a beautiful life.
I strongly feel that being born of a corpse that cannot produce the necessary hormones and other things for developmental health is going to end badly, and I say that because we've seen this happen before. I understand that her mother may not have made the choice, but Adriana Smith is in the position Adriana Smith's body is in because a doctor ignored the giant red flags in her headaches that were actually blood clots on the brain. the doctor chose to prioritize that pregnancy over Adriana Smith's life. And now Adriana Smith is dead, and her other child is growing up without a mother.
I don't think we know why the doctor ignored the headaches. I have not seen that in the news, so I don't think we actually know why. I think it's an assumption that he did that to prioritize the baby. I think it's also important to say that the law that's being blamed is the Life Act, but in reality, there are 12 states that have laws on the books that say if a pregnant woman gets into a situation like this where she's brain dead, that she will be given life-sustaining measures to get the child to viability. So even aside from the pro-life law, there are 12 states that, even pro-choice states, that protect that child and get them to the point of viability. But in the case of Georgia, it's actually a 2007 law called the Georgia Advanced Directive Healthcare Act of 2007, which says that a woman like Adriana Smith would have had to have an advance directive to say that she did not want to be kept on life-sustaining measures in order to be taken off of them. So the media is blaming the Life Act. I support the Life Act, but really it has to do with the Georgia Healthcare Act of 2007 saying that she needed an advance directive. Either way, it's too early to know what will happen, but I am hoping for the best for Chance in this really tragic situation.
So we've been talking about now kind of states and legal access, so I want to continue on that topic, looking at public opinion and the kind of the future of voter referenda and things like that. So Pew Research polling from last April finds that 63% of US adults say that abortion should be legal in all or most cases, while only 36% say it should be illegal in all or most cases. So how should we balance prevailing public attitudes post-Roe v. Wade with constitutional rights while crafting these abortion laws? And to what extent do we believe that majority opinion should influence the scope of legal access? So I believe we're starting with you this time.
So I'm used to being outnumbered, especially living in Connecticut. So when we did the poll and it was, the majority of people in the room are pro-choice, I'm used to those numbers. But just because the majority believe that something is okay doesn't mean it's right. There was at one point that the majority of people believed that it was okay to enslave Africans, and that didn't make it right. The majority of people in Nazi Germany believed that it was okay to treat Jewish people as if they were, garbage and less than human, but it doesn't mean that that's right. We have to think about, why does the majority of people believe that it's okay to dismember or kill a child in the womb? Well, we've had 50 years of legalized abortion. We've had 50 years of propaganda. We've had 50 years of eugenics and the idea that certain people, if they're born in foster care, and also, by the way, the goal of foster care is reunification. So a lot of those numbers are children that are actually not able to be adopted because they're waiting to be reunified with their parents. But there's a reason why the majority of people think that abortion is okay, because that's what we've been force-fed all of our lives. We've been told that it's a liberating thing, that it's empowerment, that it's self-care, and it's really none of those things. It's actually oppression, and it's rooted in racism and eugenics. But it's not shocking to me that the majority of people in America would think that it's okay to kill a child in the womb, because at one point I didn't have an opinion about it either until my eyes were opened, not only to me and my life and the value of that, but the value of every single child. And so I think that we don't make laws just based on the majority and what they think is popular or right, because those things shift like the sand. We make laws based on protecting the human person. We know it's a human being inside of their mother's womb. It's a human person, and people can debate what is a person. We've done that throughout all of human history, but we know it's a human being, and they have human rights. Human beings have human rights. Regardless if it's popular or not, they should be protected.
So we love to take this back to Margaret Sanger, but abortion predates Margaret Sanger by about 4,000 years or so, right? They were performing abortions in ancient Egypt, in Sumeria. There are nursery rhymes about pennyroyal and rue that are really songs as women pass on how to abort. The reality is that in nature and in American society in particular, if we are assuming that everyone is equal, then nobody gets to make a decision for anyone else about their body. If we are assuming that women deserve equal rights to men, that people who are of Black, Jewish, indigenous, whatever, all deserve rights, then we have to be willing to accept that the things we are uncomfortable with that they are doing are none of our business, right? And medical care is explicitly none of our business. If we are going to say, well, I think we should balance this with that, and this is a human, and blah, 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 that's great. I have heard that speech a million times. The problem comes when push comes to blood with what we do when things go wrong. What we do when we decide that someone, because of their gender, does not deserve to make their own decisions. No one is saying you should have an abortion if you don't believe in abortion. I am saying that when we talk about the popular vote and all of those things, we should also recognize that this is a democracy. And in a democracy, generally speaking, the majority of the votes win. And it's not really 50 years of propaganda. It is thousands of years of human history in which humans have discovered and discerned in societies that have risen and fallen and risen again, that when we force people who do not want to give birth, we have terrible outcomes. We should probably pay attention to history, learn from it.
I mean, Cain killed Abel in the Bible, and that's one of the oldest stories that we have in Jewish and Christian history, but it doesn't mean that it was right. Just because people have done something for thousands of years doesn't mean that it's right. Humans have always killed each other, whether it's a mother ending the life of the child in the womb, or whether it's a brother killing another brother. Yes, you're going to be able to look throughout all of human history, and you'll be able to find people who have killed people. And you'll be able to find mothers who have killed their children, but it doesn't mean it's right. And yes, abortion didn't start with Margaret Sanger, of course, but Margaret Sanger absolutely advanced it, and especially when it came to in America and the eugenics movement, and she brought Planned Parenthood, which was once called the American Birth Control League, into center stage in America. And now here we are later, where Planned Parenthood kills over 400,000 children every single year. So it did not start with Margaret Sanger, but she absolutely was a forerunner for pushing abortion on demand in America. And Planned Parenthood now is the #1 provider of abortions, and that was her doing.
Margaret Sanger pushed for birth control and access to abortion because women were dying in childbirth in droves. Let us be clear about the world in which Margaret Sanger created this movement in which eugenics enters the room. Yes, eugenics is a problem. It is absolutely a horrifying crime against humanity. But let us also be clear that what we were seeing, and you can look at your own family trees sometimes and find out great-great-granddad had 6 wives, and great-great-granddad's first 5 wives died in childbirth, right? You had childbed fever and other such things. We have preeclampsia now and other such names. The reality when we are talking about this is that all too often, as we say, well, it is a child, it is being dismembered, it is a clump of cells for a big portion of this developmental stage that may or may not make it regardless of intervention. And since you brought up Cain and Abel, let us all remind ourselves that the Bible is a story. The Bible is not history. The Bible is a religious mythos many people believe in, but not everyone believes in, and it cannot be the guidebook for other people of other faiths.
The Bible does include history. I mean, there are historical accounts that are backed
Yeah, it
up,
includes
you know.
history. That doesn't make it
But
true.
I will say this, and there's really, you know, so much to say. Margaret Sanger she believed in forced sterilization. She believed in putting birth control in the water supply. She believed that humans could be compared to weeds that could be pulled up from the ground. Her Negro Project was focused on getting Black ministers to push birth control. She was not there to help the Black community. It's very clear that she was there to exterminate them from her writings and from the fruit of what has happened from the work that she did. She worked with people like Lothrop Stoddard, who wrote a book called The Rising Tide of Color Against White Supremacy. He was one of her early board members for the American Birth Control League. She was a woman who, yes, lived in a time where women were dying from childbirth. Women are still dying. Women die from abortions. Cree Irwin, Lakeisha Wilson, Tanya Reeves. Women, unfortunately, will always die in some measure from pregnancy or abortion. But Margaret Sanger, she had really evil intent to bring about population control for a people that she did not think were as good as the white race. And that's probably why you rarely see abortion supporters quote her. In all the years I've done pro-life work, I've never really seen abortion supporters share her writings. They may say they support Planned Parenthood, but they're rarely sharing her quotes, and she has many of them, because when you listen to her and she talks about human beings and she says they're marked from they're born, they're just marked, I think even most people are disgusted. And that's probably why Planned Parenthood of New York took her name off of their building just a few years ago and wanted to distance themselves from Margaret Sanger, because they don't want to reckon with her legacy and history, because it's very ugly. Now, of course, they're still carrying out her dirty work. Distancing themselves from her name didn't change anything, but there's a reason that they took her name off that building in New York, because her history is horrible.
Oh, the history of Margaret Sanger is in fact horrible, but so is the history of pro-lifers. So is the history of pro-lifers who have been willing, in many cases, I'm going to use Jill Stanick's name at this point, to testify to things that were objectively false, to lead crusades, and if we want to get into who has done horrible things, we have pro-lifers that murder doctors. We have pro-lifers that blow up clinics, right? Nobody's hands in that perspective are going to be great and clean, because humanity is littered with people who got one thing right and 97 things wrong. That's one of the foibles of being human. I do not, however, think that because Margaret Sanger is terrible, I should decide to abrogate someone else's rights based off Margaret Sanger's politics. I think that I do not know everyone's situation, and nor does anyone else. And we should be clear and careful not to make our decisions in this country based on the words of white supremacists of either side. Because if we do that, we run right into a lot of ugly history very quickly.
You are right that people who call themselves pro-life,
They are
some
pro-life.
people who, no, they're not, because to be pro-life means that you care about the human person. You can't bomb an abortion clinic or kill someone and say that you're pro-life. You can say it, but it's a false claim, because you're, by your actions, violating your stated belief, which is you believe in human dignity, you believe in protecting the human person. There have been evil things done in the name of the pro-life cause, religion, everything, but I do not believe those people are actually pro-life.
That's a no true Scotsman's fallacy. I know you need to move on.
I'd like to move on just to our final theme for the moderated section of this event. I think it segues, but where do you believe your movement should go next? And do you believe a constitutional change might be necessary?
Yes, I believe a constitutional change, specifically the Equal Rights Amendment, is necessary. One of the things as we're having this conversation, and America is not rooted in the idea that women are legally adults, right? America is rooted in the idea that women are legally children. And by proxy, so are a lot of other groups. In fact, America is rooted in the idea that only wealthy white male landowners should have the right to vote, right? And we have altered the Constitution repeatedly. And one of the places where we have faltered is in establishing the idea that equal rights for all, and yes, the Civil Rights Act attempts to establish it, it is currently under attack, right? And a world in which the Civil Rights Act is under attack and the Equal Rights Amendment does not exist is a world in which many parts of this conversation will get much trickier, because then it won't just be about reproductive rights. It will be about the right to vote. It will be about the right to have a bank account. It will be about the right to leave a marriage without cause. It will be about a host of things. And so I think in many ways, I am, of course, very much a hood feminist. We need to be focused on making sure that everyone, regardless of gender identity, ability to get pregnant, inability to get pregnant, wealth, whatever, has the right to make their own decisions and is an equal citizen under the law.
I love that you said you're a hood feminist. And that's her book. If you guys probably already know that, but I got your book.
Oh, yeah.
I have it. Maybe if you're not upset with me after this, maybe you might autograph it for me. It's in my purse. But I do love that, just because we are minorities in this movement. Whether you are pro-life or pro-choice, there's more white people than there are black. And sometimes I found that it's hard to have conversations like this. So I appreciate this conversation. But to the question of where should the pro-life movement go, I want to see Planned Parenthood defunded. They get $800 million a year from our federal government, and You know how I feel about them based off of what I said and the 400,000 plus abortions they do a year. They should not be getting taxpayer dollars from our government. I'd like to see them defunded. I'd like to see abortion abolished on the federal level in every state. I'd like to see life protected in the womb. I would like to see things change with paid parental leave. I would like for women to be able to stay home longer with their children like they do in Europe and other parts of the world. I think America is not doing it's just, due for pregnant women and families. I would like to see pregnancy resource centers expanded. We have over 2,000 across the country, but I would like to see more. I'd like to see community members and churches and everyone come from across the aisle and come together to be able to have better resources, whether that's maternity homes. In Connecticut, that's something that we don't have enough of. When I work with pregnant women and I'm calling shelters, and I'm calling maternity homes, and they're saying they're full and it's wintertime and there's nowhere for them to go, I'm thinking, how is this possible that we can be in such a rich state and have so many resources, but we don't have homes for pregnant women? And that's just unacceptable. And so I would say that defunding Planned Parenthood, abolishing abortion, and then doing as much as we can to undergird women and their families and give them that kind of practical support.
I just want to say here that Planned Parenthood gets that money because in many locations, Planned Parenthood is the only place providing health care for women, trans people, and in general, things like breast cancer screening. And before you say, well, they don't do mammograms, breast cancer screening starts before the mammogram. I know I've been to Planned Parenthood for breast cancer screening. So when we are talking about defunding Planned Parenthood, I just have to put this on the table, we are talking about leaving entire communities without a way for people to seek health care. And I know that people want to point to the abortions, but Planned Parenthood does a lot more than abortions. And quite honestly, if we're going to have a reproductive justice conversation, once again, we have to understand that if you are looking for HRT or a dozen and one other things, in general, in this country, we do not have enough healthcare facilities for people who have a uterus at all. And therefore, I want to see us understand that A, yes, we do need more places that provide health care, and B, we need to understand and recognize that just because we do not like the health care someplace provides, that does not mean that it shouldn't exist.
It's more than just not liking their health care. I mean, Planned Parenthood has been found guilty of aiding abusers. If you go to Live Action, we have an entire report how they've covered up sex trafficking. They've been found guilty of fetal trafficking when it comes to human remains. They've had to testify before Congress because of that. Planned Parenthood is guilty of so many things. It's more than just, I don't like them. It's that they've done things that we should not be giving them taxpayer dollars. But there are these things called, federally qualified health centers, and they actually exist in greater number than Planned Parenthood does. They're more than double federally qualified health centers than Planned Parenthoods, and they don't do abortions, but they provide cancer screenings and mammograms and prenatal care and all sorts of other resources. So you don't have to fund an organization that does those things and also kills children in the womb. You can give resources to federally qualified health centers, community health centers, and other organizations, and they can provide all of those needed resources without the injustice of killing children.
And I think, and I want to be very clear here, and this is not personal, but I want you to understand that when you say they don't provide abortions, that means you are abrogating someone's access to the very same medical care that saved my life, that has saved the lives of thousands of women in this country. Abortions are medical care. And as long as you can limit medical care based on someone else's idea of where tax dollars should go, you are not providing equitable access to medical care. Just so we're clear, my tax dollars, I want them to go to Planned Parenthood.
And with that, I'd like to move on to audience Q&A. So if you're interested in asking a question, just come into the aisle, and you'll see on either side, we have two members of the DPU.
Don't be shy.
Oh, okay, cool. Hi, so I just want to ask you a question. So you talked about how your mother saw an angel when she was pregnant with you, but my question is my perspective is what the angel did was empower your mother to make her own choice to have you, and it wasn't an abortion law that stopped abortion that helped you. So how would you respond to that? Thank you.
Well, thank you for asking that question, but I want to make sure I understand. Maybe you can come back to the mic. I want to make sure I understand that question. So I hear you saying that the angel janitor person that my mom encountered, she helped her or empowered her to make a choice. But what is the question exactly?
What I hear the other debaters saying is that abortion is part of essentially giving the woman all of the options, and your mother was in a situation, as I understand it, she was forced to get an abortion. But what the angel was doing was empowering her to make her own choice, which is to have you. And so it was empowering women, not necessarily abortion laws that saved you. So I'm wondering how that fits into your understanding of abortion.
Okay, so I don't believe that there's anything empowering about the choice to end a pregnancy in the womb through an act of violence. And so my mother had the choice to choose an abortion or not because we're in Connecticut, and Connecticut is a pro-choice state currently. Hopefully one day that will change. And so what she was doing was not giving my mother, a choice. Legally, she had that abortion access already. But what she was doing was, well, first of all, what she was doing was just asking her what she wanted and how she was, because she had just left, I didn't share this, but she had just left the counselor's office, and they had just looked at her, this particular counselor, and said, well, this seems like the best decision for you to make. Based off of what, I don't know, because she was young, because she was black, because she was low income, because she was not married. I don't know, but this counselor said, this seems like the best decision for you to make. And this angel janitor said to her, do you want to have this baby? My mom did, and she was, wrestling with, being coerced. She wasn't forced, she wasn't in a situation like some people are where they're, maybe sex trafficked and they're forced, but she was under, coercion. But when we talk about abortion, there are many choices that I believe are okay for women to have, even when it comes to their bodily autonomy. But I don't believe that it's ever okay to choose to end the life of another human being, because my mother's rights ended where my rights began. I was a unique individual growing inside of her womb, and so even though she had the legal choice to be able to kill me, it would have been an unjust and wrong decision. And so I don't see it that the angel, the janitor, reaffirmed or empowered her choice. I see it as she was there in the 11th hour when my mom really needed someone. I don't think it should have taken that. I think, honestly, she went to a church beforehand, and she told her mentor at church that she was pregnant, and the woman said, if you come back to this church, I won't let you in, because she was so upset about her being pregnant outside of marriage. I think probably at that point is where she should have had the discussion and gotten support, so she never even had to go to Mount Sinai Hospital. But unfortunately, that was the last result, and she was met there, and that saved my life. So I'm not sure if that answers your question exactly, but I think you're looking for the way that I think about it, and that's how I view it. I view it as an 11th hour miracle, and actually when I heard it, I thought I want to be that for somebody else, and now I have been. There are multiple children that are alive today, Kaizen and King and Knowledge and Eden, and there's multiple, little black boys and girls that are alive today because I was able to be there and to be that person at the 11th hour to tell their mom it's going to be okay and give them that support. And so I look at her as an inspiration to me.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
I would just say that I think it's great that your mom had the resources, had some kinds of support, had someone there for her. I don't think anyone should ever be coerced into an abortion.
Of course.
But I think abortion should always be in the range of options for anyone who wants to choose one. I think it ultimately should come down to the decision of the pregnant person.
Right. I mean, that's a very common thing that people have told me over the years. I remember I went to Morehouse University years ago and did a discussion, and that was one of the things that people said to me, at least your mother had a choice. It's very common. But then I say, well, what was that choice? And it sounds nicer to say, at least your mother had a choice than to say, at least your mother had a choice to dismember you if she wanted to.
Abortion is not always dismemberment.
It's not. Sometimes it's suction, and sometimes it's a pill that starves the child of nutrients, causing them to die.
It is a pill that triggers the body's own natural processes to expel the tissue. Let us be clear, because you keep using this language of violence to emphasize your personal belief system. The reality is that the procedure I had, the curative dilation and curettage, it also is necessary after, for many women, a successful pregnancy, because you can develop an infection in leftover tissue. It prevents people from going septic. It is not about being violent. It is preventing a further medical crisis.
So it's actually 2 pills when it comes to the abortion pill, mifepristone and misoprostol. And the first pill, it sucks the nutrients, particularly progesterone, and takes that away from the growing baby.
Progesterone is not a nutrient, progesterone is a hormone.
The second pill causes the child to be expelled. But if you're talking about a D&C, yes, I know that D&Cs can be done aside from an abortion. D&Cs are part of miscarriage management. So it's not the procedure that I'm against. I'm not against D&Cs. There are women who have a child that is non-viable and their child passes in the womb, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with having a D&C to remove a baby that's deceased. But when that's being done to a living, growing child, that is when it's an act of violence, because
it is a medical procedure.
Act of violence ends a human life. And of course, that's where we're going to differ, because medical procedures should do no harm, and abortion through the pill or through a D&C does harm. It ends the life of a child. If I was aborted, I would have been turned into medical waste, and thankfully that didn't happen, but that would have been an act of violence. That would have destroyed my life.
I mean, you would not have known the difference.
I think I would have known, but that's a religious discussion.
Right.
I would have got to heaven and thought, man, that was a really short life. I wish that I got to experience it longer.
Also, abortion, generally speaking, and D&Cs and all of the issues we're talking about, I know first do no harm is a concept in terms of the oath doctors take, but if you've ever seen chemo, sometimes you have to harm someone to save them.
To save them.
And sometimes it's saving the person who is pregnant.
Well, pro-lifers believe in saving both the mother and the child and doing everything that you can to try to preserve both lives, not to end one.
Okay, let's move on to our next audience question.
Thank you so much both for a great debate. I wanted to ask, and part of this was answered during the last discussion, but Mrs. Bennett, so you shared that you're in support of medically induced, not so much abortions, but in the case where it would save a mother's life to then remove the fetus, where you kind of draw the line between the death that might come upon that fetus following the medically induced abortion, or what you might call it, and the dismemberment that you just mentioned that could then happen during an abortion. And then Ms. Kendall, in response to that, kind of where you draw the line between the viability of a fetus and what would then constitute kind of a harm to the fetus within the uterus. Thank you.
Sure. So, as I mentioned before, the pro-life position, supports any form of miscarriage management. I myself have suffered a miscarriage, and it's one of the most horrible things to have a doctor tell you that they no longer hear the heartbeat of your child, and that's a really scary thing. And of course, everyone who has had to suffer in that way or has suffered in that way should get quality health care. There's many things about your story and even just the way that doctor said, I don't do abortions, that just, I believe was handled wrong, and it infuriates me. But when we're talking about the child in the womb, what I support when I mention child being induced is pro-life OBGYNs or doctors, they are able to induce and bring a baby into the world who has passed away. Many of you may have seen friends or family members where they've suffered in this way, and then perhaps they go online and they show the picture of that child and they get a few moments with that child to be able to hold them. We believe that that is a humanizing way of delivering a child in a situation where they are not going to live. It's very clear the mother's life is at danger, and it's a non-viable pregnancy, but to be able to induce, to be able to give that child dignity, and to be able to give the parent perhaps a moment to be with that child, perhaps bury the child, whatever the circumstances may be, that is what pro-life OBGYNs and doctors prefer. And I'm just kind of scratching the surface, but I would say if you're interested in looking deeper, go to Live Action's YouTube, and we have a number of OBGYNs and doctors who go into detail about that and how abortion is never medically necessary.
And from my perspective, A, dubious sourcing in the idea that abortion is never medically necessary. B, I think that when we're talking about viability, I think the earliest viable preemie was something like 24 or 26 weeks. I'm always iffy on the weeks. It's towards the end of the second trimester. I think that before that point, if you need to have an abortion for whatever your reason is, that's twixt you, your doctor, and whatever God you serve or do not serve. I think after that point, it can be a little more complicated, but also medically, I was in labor for 19 hours with my oldest. I did not have drugs. I think often when we present this as though the delivering of an intact corpse is very important, perhaps for some people they find closure in that. I personally would not want to go through labor to deliver a child that is not viable, and the hours that labor can take. I know that that is a procedure some people opt for. I would personally prefer, having actually been through labor without drugs, to never do that again, or labor with drugs. Because I gotta tell you, the physical effects on your body of pregnancy and labor are under-discussed and understood, shall we say. I have permanent damage to the muscles in my back as a result of having children. It's not a big deal for me. I've had physical therapy and all of these things, but I know that things can go wrong. I was lucky. I never had preeclampsia, but I lost a very good friend to preeclampsia during labor, right? You shouldn't have to risk that stroke. You shouldn't have to risk your life in order for some people to feel better about what is ultimately still an abortion. You should do whatever best serves you medically, is where I fall.
Hi, thank you so much for your answers and both for being here. I have a long history of single, teen, low-income mothers in my family, and many are deeply religious, and that influenced their choice to not get abortions, or in some cases, I know families who counsel people through, that decision and that decision-making process. But for my mom, I know, even though she would probably agree with the kind of life starts in the womb and many other pro-life reasonings, it's a kind of an equal justice question of, she's seen, the men in her life or not in her life, not able to, or not providing child support, or being domestic abusers, and the lack of accountability that, or even role that men have in this kind of debate of kind of where kind of care for the child after they're born, or even like during the pregnancy. And I know that there's lots of complicated issues and like with enforcing that, but I kind of am curious about both of your thoughts about this being the abortion debate as an equal justice debate, and about thinking about rights and gender equality. I can also clarify.
Yeah.
That's helpful, sorry.
So I think I know where you were going with that, and I put it to you this way. I don't believe there's a gender binary. I think gender is a spectrum. So let's start there, right? I think that because one end of that spectrum can get pregnant, we have tended to decide that that end of the spectrum has more duty and responsibility than the end that can get people pregnant. The reality is that aside from the discomforts of an even healthy pregnancy, you lose teeth, all of these other things that can happen, right? You then end up in a place where after that child is born, and I'm going to go with a wanted child, culturally, we expect mothers to set themselves on fire. We expect whoever gave birth, but particularly if they are femme presenting, to sacrifice everything, right? And we hold them to a standard that we do not hold fathers or genetic donors to. And because of that imbalance, we always end up in an inequitable conversation when it comes to things like abortion, right? Because I've seen too often people say, well, she shouldn't have been out there. You know what leads to babies. If you're having a baby, you better be ready to take care of it. And then immediately after say that child support is unfair. I need you to hold these two thoughts together, friends. If she is now given birth, or they have now given birth, and that child exists, that child needs to be fed, educated, have access to medical care, housed, all of these things. And if that duty is joint, right, if we're going to say, don't breed them if you can't feed them, we got to say that about everybody in the room. And if someone in a situation where they look at the person who they have created the possibility of a child with, and they say, that is going to be someone who does not, right? To badly quote Glorilla, if he don't want the baby, don't keep it. Because what tends to happen is poverty, right? One of the single greatest predictors of poverty is being a single mother. Is that fair? Is that right? Absolutely not. But the consequences of poverty are far-reaching and, as you know, multi-generational, right? And sure, some people will get themselves out of that, but when we're talking about things like foster care or crime or anything else, poverty enters that conversation. And as a culture, and we're talking about the U.S., but not just the U.S., we don't like poor people. We don't want to support poor people. We don't want to help poor people. And people tend to point to Europe as utopian about poverty. It really isn't. I lived in Germany. It's just better than the worst possible outcome. But just barely getting by is not actually a high quality of life. And until we're going to fix that layer, I feel like the equal right here is to make sure everyone has the same choice. Because if he can walk away and never pay a dime, she can decide that she does not want to continue this pregnancy because it is not financially viable for her.
Well, thank you for your question. I was raised by a single mother, and so I definitely know the struggles and how challenging it can be, because I've seen my mom suffer and sacrifice in so many ways to support me and my brother. My husband will tell you that I always say that I have an affinity, special affection for single moms. So even on Mother's Day, we took out the single mom with us to go eat for Mother's Day, because I'm always thinking of how we can support mothers who often are alone. We barely even touched, the topic of men when it comes to abortion. But I will say, in my experience working with pregnant women, that one of the number one reasons that a woman chooses abortion is because a man is telling her to do it, or telling her that he's going to leave her, or telling her he's not going to support her. It doesn't have to be so intense like they're coercing her, but just do whatever you want. Men are told in society that it's her body, her choice, and so you just tell her that she can do whatever she wants, and that's support. But oftentimes that actually leaves pregnant women feeling alone, because they're looking for some sort of partnership, not just do whatever you want and here's money if you want to go have the abortion. And so I think that men play a huge role when it comes to abortion, because it allows them to be promiscuous, to have sexual relationships without consequences, to be able to leave the mother and to go on to somebody else. I've just seen so many horrible things. That's why child support is important. I remember my mom, even when we were young, fighting to be able to get that. And I've worked with many moms fighting for them to be able to get child support, and I'm grateful for that. I'm also grateful for any government program, whether it's something like SNAP or WIC or anything that helps single moms. But I think that men, there needs to be a realization of how much abortion benefits them, because it allows them to, in many cases, use and abuse women, whether that's just the boyfriend who pressures a girl to abort and then leaves, or whether it's a sex trafficker who is trafficking young girls and then taking them over to Planned Parenthood to get abortions so that he can then keep them in business. And I think as a woman that I don't know how much I can speak to men. I know they hear me, but I don't know if I am the best person. I think that oftentimes men maybe need to hear it from other men, that they have a responsibility to their child even when they're growing in the womb. I know my husband, when people ask him, what does your wife do? And he shares, sometimes men will open up and say, I've had so many abortions I can't count, or they'll share guilt and pain that they've had over paying for abortions. Again, not everyone. Some men are happy to have a girl get an abortion, but for some men it does hurt them. And he has these conversations that I don't know if I can have them in the same way that he does. And so I'm not sure if this is what you're looking for in an answer, but I would just say that I think that men play a big role in promoting abortion, and I think that it benefits them, and that's why so many of them won't speak out against it. And I think it's a cover. I think it's easy for them to say, I am, supporting you, your body, your choice, I'm with you, knowing that those can be just words and they can just walk away and leave a woman abandoned. I guess the last thing I'll say is this, just a personal observation that's kind of saddened me, definitely saddened me, is that I felt like maybe even 20, 30 years ago, I've been in pro-life work for 20 years, and so if you had a woman and she was pregnant and the guy didn't want to be around, I saw more of this camaraderie. Women would come around her and say, not that you don't need him, but we'll be here for you, we'll support you. That's kind of how it was with me growing up. I grew up in a family of mostly women. But now I go on TikTok and I see that particularly I see a lot in the Black community, this attitude of kind of what you shared, like, if he doesn't want that baby, like almost like you're a fool to have that baby. And I get that, because I get it, Why would you want to have a baby without a partner? You're going to feel alone. You're going to have to deal with all of the weight and the struggle of that. So I understand the perspective, but it's almost that people are kind of like harassed. So I saw Deion Sanders, the football coach, his daughter got pregnant, and the whole situation with the guy, and he was kind of talking to somebody else. And people didn't know if he really wanted the baby, and people were just coming on her Instagram page just saying, basically, you're a fool if you keep this baby. And especially someone like her, I thought, does anyone realize that, even if this guy is not involved, which he ended up being involved, and she ended up keeping the baby because of medical reasons, and she said that she was told she would never be able to have a child, so she didn't want to abort this child. But I was thinking, do people see that she also has a dad and brothers and other things? Not everybody has that much privilege that she does, but just in normal conversations, I'm seeing that it's kind of gone from, even if the man's not there, as women, we're going to come around you and support you, to now you're judged if you're a woman and you say you actually do want to keep the baby, even if the guy doesn't want you to. The mindset is that you're a fool to do that, and I just want to say that I don't believe that. I don't believe that you're a fool. It's still your child. Yes, it has the DNA from the male partner and the woman as well, but even if you have to go it alone and get support, and that partner, that boyfriend, whoever it may be, doesn't want you or want that baby, it doesn't make that child's life any less valuable. So that's just something that I've noticed a lot when I'm online, and it just saddens me.
And I just think that the shift in tone is because ultimately what is happening is that the cost of being a single parent has increased drastically. I was able to be a single parent after my first marriage ended, because back then, in the yesteryears of yore, many of you won't remember this, it was 2001, public housing still existed in a semi-robust format. You could still get SNAP, which is currently on the chopping block for a bill being pushed through Congress. you could still get what was called, I think, child care action back then. It's had different names, but a child care subsidy that matched what daycare cost, because back then child care cost $600 a month. Daycare is between $200 and $2,400 a month now, I think. It's a lot harder for the community to pull around you in an era of inflation where all the costs have gone up and the wages have not.
I mean, I would agree. I think people are tired, and that plays into it. I think that's why I'm seeing what I see online. I think people, the idea, people had argued at one point that, at one point maybe people glamorized, the strong single mother, and I think people are tired of that, and they know how hard it is, and that goes back to why I think we need to fight a lot harder for resources, because we can't just say, have a baby and figure it out. As pro-lifers, we need to be able to support them in any way we can.
In our final couple minutes, I think we have time for one more question. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Really appreciate everything y'all have to say. I do consider myself pro-choice. I also consider myself a Christian, so I really appreciate the story that you told. But I don't believe it should be common practice to have abortions, and it can certainly be greatly traumatic to the mother who has the abortion. This is primarily directed at Ms. Kendall. You also mentioned that it would be better for it to be between you and your doctor. So what process, education, or counseling, if any, do you think women should have to go through before making the decision to abort?
I think, let me backtrack this slightly to say that I was lucky enough to grow up at a time when robust sex ed was a regular part of curriculum. It was not as combative as it is now, right? So I had the kind of sex ed classes where they filled the condom with water and stretched it over a tree to show you that you absolutely, nobody was too big for a condom, right? They brought in all the examples of ways to prevent pregnancy. And I feel like to some degree, we need to follow that through line all the way through to talking about abortion, right? We need to explain what the procedures are, right? When we say that it starves the baby of nutrients, the nutrient is not a nutrient, it's a hormone, it's progesterone, right? Your body produces progesterone in general. During pregnancy, it produces more as part of helping the cells form. That is just how that works, right? Hormones are the first part of this. And placental formation. I want people to understand all of their options, all of the processes, and be able to sit back and have an informed conversation without judgment, whether it be with a doctor, a counselor, their partner, whoever, and then walk into that room making the decision that is best for them. And the reason I say that is because everyone's situation, we can share 1,000,001 anecdotes, right? But everyone's situation is different. The decision that I would make now as a best-selling author, if I were to have a surprise pregnancy, is not the decision I might have made about a third child when I was 21 and coming out of the military and leaving a bad relationship, right? There's a lot of things betwixt the cup and the lip, so to speak, here. And I think often when we try to set uniform policy and say, well, this should be legal, this shouldn't be legal, we're ignoring all of those nuances. And I want to leave space for people who are in situations that I cannot fathom, right? Incest, underreported, but every few years or so we have that case where we find out someone's decided to lock their oldest daughter, youngest daughter, whoever, in the basement and force them to have children, right? And this happens in more than one country. We've just had that case that came out of France that has yielded horrifying results of men setting up their spouses and sometimes their siblings and children to be sexually assaulted repeatedly by strangers while drugged. If you get pregnant from a situation like that and you decide you do not want to have that child, baby, who am I to get between you and your decisions, right? Who am I to tell you anything? And yes, I know there are supposed to be exceptions, but there are also people regularly lobbying to get rid of those exceptions. So I never want us to try to write policy based off our individual experience in a best case scenario for someone else's worst case scenario is what it comes down to.
Before we close, would you guys each like 1 minute to give your concluding thoughts?
Well, can I respond
Yeah.
too, or just say? So when I say that it starves the baby of nutrients, I'm talking about progesterone in the sense that it's needed for the baby to survive. And I didn't mention this before, but I do want to say that there is something called abortion pill reversal. And basically what that does is after the woman takes the first pill and the child is starved of that progesterone, if they are able to go to a pro-life doctor or medical professional and they're able to get progesterone put back into their body, there is a chance that that pregnancy can continue. And there are women, even that I know, who have taken the first abortion pill, then they've gotten progesterone, and then their child has survived and even thrived. So I just wanted to mention that. I'd love to talk to you after and just understand a little bit more about your belief system, being Christian and then also being pro-choice, but then also, just having the particular views that you express. So if you'd ever like to talk about that. But I just wanted to share that. And then you said closing statements?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I never thought that I would do this for a living. I didn't even know that you could be a pro-life advocate because I didn't know any pro-life advocates. But now this is a spiritual story, so take it for what it is. But when I found out that my mom walked out of her abortion appointment, in prayer, I believe that God said to me, Christina, I wanted you. I wanted you. And I didn't know what to do with my story. It wasn't that I knew, okay, I'm going to go into this kind of, work or activism. But after I felt that God had said to me, I wanted you, there was a question that followed, which was, how do you think I feel about the others? And that's my, story of being asked that question by the Holy Spirit and then going out and listening to stories of other women. I wanted to know who the others were, so I began to listen to stories of women who had abortions, took the abortion pill. One of the first stories I heard was a woman who passed her child in the toilet, and years later I could still remember and see her face and how traumatized she was. And this is way before I learned the history of Planned Parenthood and racism and eugenics and everything else, but I just saw the pain that abortion caused women, even when they wanted it, even when they fought for it, even when they thought that it was good, that for some of them, not all of them, but for some of them, years later, they would have that regret. They would say, my child would have been 5, would have been 10. I've seen women with gray hair with the tears in their eyes remembering their child and the abortion that they had. And I realized that this is not what I was told. I was told in school, public school, my whole life that this is liberation, but I began to see it as oppression, and I began to see it as injustice, and I began to see it as the greatest human rights, civil rights issue of my day. And I thought, I'm just one person, but if I can save a life, that's the most important thing. And so that's why I'm pro-life. It's very simple, because I believe that abortion is the direct intentional killing of a human being. I believe that human beings, even in the womb, have human rights, and that they should be protected and that they should be fought for. And I guess I'll just say this. I know the majority of you are pro-choice. And I know that Mikki believes that really the reason doesn't matter. If you want to have an abortion, really, the reason doesn't matter. And I understand, I believe where you're coming from with that. But I just want to say this. You will encounter women who are pregnant. And if you think that the reason doesn't matter, you might miss out on something. I'm not saying that you have to go and be an advocate for life like I am. But I would say that I think it might be good to just understand a little bit about why they might want an abortion. Because what if it is because they are being pressured or coerced? What if it is because they feel like they can't finish school and also have this child? What if it is some reason that if they got what they needed, if they got those resources, then perhaps they would make a decision that they can live with and feel good about? Not saying that people don't have abortions and feel good about that decision or feel fine with it for the rest of their lives. I'm just saying that oftentimes I think that when you're pro-choice, you say, okay, I'm pro-choice. So if a woman says she wants to have an abortion, go for it, have that abortion. And as a pro-lifer, when a woman says she wants to have an abortion, I don't believe in abortion, so I'm digging, what are the root causes? What's going on? Do you not have housing? Do you not have health care? What can I do? How can I help you? And oftentimes I find that women who were so adamant just really needed some help. And then when they got that help, they've said to me many times, Christina, thank you so much. My child is here because of you, and I'm very grateful. Not all the time. I've also seen women say, I'm going to get an abortion, and they've gotten an abortion. I've seen multiple women do that, leave, where I worked at the pregnancy center, or just stop talking to me, you get an abortion. And oftentimes they come back because I always try to treat people with dignity and respect no matter what, and they know that the door's always open, and I'm always going to love them regardless of what they do. But I'm just challenging you. If you're pro-choice and you leave being pro-choice, but you do encounter a pregnant woman, could you just say, you know, I understand if your mind's made up, but is there any way that I could help you? And just be willing to do that, even if that help is just listening to them.
I am agnostic about many things. One of the things I'm not agnostic about is a person's right to self-determination. I don't regret my abortion because I had 2 living children who have grown to be wonderful adults with a present and active mother in their life as a result of me having an abortion. I think often when we get into these conversations and we start talking about things like needs and whatever, listen, it's great to help someone if they are on the fence and they think something would make them change their mind. It is also great to respect other people's autonomy, to respect their ability to make their own decisions and their own choices, and to understand that just because someone is making a choice you would not personally make, that does not make it the wrong choice. I don't personally understand people who like fried catfish. It smells like garbage. Who wants to eat garbage? There are people who tell me it's delicious. Now, you can't fry it in my house, but I'm not going to stop you from eating it. I want people to understand that sometimes abortion is for a very mundane reason. I do not want to be a parent. I do not want to place a child for adoption or foster care. I do not want to carry a pregnancy to term, whether it is for health reasons, appearance, whatever thing you think is not a good enough reason, it doesn't matter because you're not in that body. Ultimately, fundamentally, if we believe in equal rights for everyone, we have to mean that. We have to mean without exception that other people get to make decisions about our body. And the reason we have to mean that is because fascism is a creeping tide, right? We talked a little bit about eugenics. I'm going to talk a little bit about fascism and how so much of fascism hinged around the idea that forcing people to give birth would keep women subject to others, would keep women out of the workforce, out of education. That whole woman's place is in the home bit, right? One of the most dangerous places to be a woman is in the home when you do not have options and choices. So whether you are actually identifying as a woman, you are trans, you are non-binary, because again, gender is a spectrum. I want you to understand that I firmly believe that you get to make decisions about your body. And I firmly believe that you should be the only person that gets to make decisions about your body. Because if we're going to talk about trafficking or coercion or any of that, that doesn't just come from one direction. That can come from anywhere on the socioeconomic spectrum. And I want you to be a person who is free to make your own decisions at all times based on the information that best suits your life and your future. Thank you.
And with that, we'll conclude.
What an incredible debate. Please join me in thanking Ms. Mikki Kendall, Ms. Christina Bennett, and Ms. Grace Wilkins for providing us with such an engaging conversation. Before we close, real quick, guys, please take a few moments to answer this poll so we can see if anyone's mind has changed as a result of this debate. And while you're doing that, I'd like to thank you all for coming. Having supporters like you is what empowers the DPU to continue its mission for promoting the free exchange of discourse. Thank you to Ms. Mikki Kendall and Ms. Christina Bennett again for being such great debate partners. And I want to thank the Office of the President for its continuous support. Lastly, I want to take this opportunity to announce our next event, which is also our last event of the term and our last event before the fall. At 7 p.m. on Thursday, May 29th, we'll be hosting our final weekly conversation of the term on the topic of Greek life in room Carson 60. This is completely open to campus, and we hope to see all of you there. Stay tuned for more information on expert debates in the fall. With all that said, we have the results of our poll. 68.8% of you believe that abortion should be legally accessible in most cases, while 31.3% of you believe it should not. I'll ask that you all stay seated just for a moment while our guests exit the room. And once again, please join me in giving a big thanks to Miss Mikki Kendall and Miss Christina Bennett.